You mo- The council is in session after a little bit of an absence, which is my fault again, starting this new job and things are just kind of crazy. We appreciate you being patient with us, but the council has reformed tonight, and we have three very hot button topics to talk about here on the Council of St. Michael. Obviously, the Alex Pretti incident. We are going to discuss that. New information has come out in the last couple of hours that really changes the narrative on that story. I'm also going to get my council members' opinions on the MAGA base and our president, their new anti 2A rhetoric that has been coming out of the administration, why we should be worried about that. And then finally, we will talk about the incident in Minnesota with the church clash where anti-ICE protesters interrupted a service, and the things that we learned about that that are pretty troubling for church services going forward, especially in the light of the current administration once again not doing anything to protect the people that voted for them. We were expecting some kind of justice, at least in the Minnesota church clash, but we have seen nothing take place. And yet, Trump has once again, I don't care, I'm just going to set some fires tonight. Trump has once again left his supporters holding the bag. I'm not saying necessarily they fell for it, but I am saying that his most ardent supporters are left holding the bag, and I don't know what you can expect from that from going forward. But enough of all that. Before we get into the show, we here at the council, we are missing our fourth member, Joey. Joey is dealing with some family issues. So we are asking everybody to please keep Joey and keep his family in your prayers. Keep him in your rosaries, because he's facing some stuff. He's facing some stuff right now. So please continue to pray for him and his family at this time. With that, let us welcome Angel. We missed you last council meeting. Angel, how are you?
Doing very well. Too blessed to be stressed. The new year brings new things, new adjustments, and just busy. But
Mm.
glad to be on tonight and offer my limited wisdom granted by the Lord. And here we are.
Amen to that. Florida kind of bragged at the beginning of the cold cycle about how they weren't getting any cold, and then last couple of days they got hit with a little bit of it. So I found that kind of ironic in that way. But somebody who's been braving the cold with me is fellow Texan, Trad Revival Operator. How are you this evening, my brother?
Hey, doing well. We're coming up on the tail end of our little cold snap we had, the past couple days. Plenty of firewood, didn't lose power, didn't have my pipes burst. So, thanks be to God for that. But, weather in the storm, and obviously, following the news and the recent events that are happening now. Excited to talk about it, and hopefully we have a good show tonight.
I know we are. And we can talk a little bit about storm prep at the end. But I have one of the few houses in my area because it was built in the 80s that actually has a real fireplace. So I always stack wood, and people ask me, "Hey, do you light your fireplace during the event?" And I tell them, "No, the fireplace is the backup option if we lose power in the house, because that's a central heating source for us." So I still have my wood ready, stacked and ready to go in case we do. But yeah, I was also very fortunate. Drip the pipes, try to keep everything as warm as possible in select places, and hopefully, if you're in any of the areas that have been affected, viewer, with the storm, you didn't lose power, and you were able to navigate it very well. So during this time off that we had, the major story that was out there was the shooting and the death of Alex Pretti. I'm sure everybody has seen the video. We're not going to play it because YouTube will nuke us off the face of the earth for showing it. But essentially, what happens is Alex Pretti is shadowing ICE officers and officials and Border Patrol officials, anybody that's enforcing federal law. And we have seen over the last couple of weeks this vast network of paid agitators that are following ICE and Border Patrol, any law enforcement officers everywhere, disturbing them at night, bothering them when they are trying to conduct lawful operations, which is, you may not like what ICE is doing, but folks, ICE is essentially enforcing the law. You know, the reason they have to be this way, and this is what I've been saying, is because the immigration situation is so out of control that it has to be done this way. So there is a woman that gets involved with the ICE officers. They push her back. Alex Pretti decides to, for whatever reason, step between the two of them. He gets pepper sprayed. He resists arrest. He's on the ground. He is disarmed. And in irony of all ironies on the face of this earth, it's a SIG P320 that goes off in the hand of the officer as he's disarmed. Officer hears shots, and they proceed to confront the threat. Huge outrage. You have the left saying that ICE agents are murdering Alex Pretti. You have all of these other things. We'll get into the reaction, but I want to go Trad, then Angel. Your thoughts on, you know, both of you are members of the military in some capacity. Your thoughts on the engagement, the use of force. How did you respond to the video, Trad?
No, excellent. And I had a pretty multifaceted response, I would say. My initial reaction, I would say, from the onset of the angle that I saw, right? And since the days of the event, we've had multiple angles of the shooting. Multiple different videos have come out recently, and I'm sure we'll get to that later, the most recent one. But my initial reaction was, that looks like a bad shoot, right? That you see in the angle, at least the video that I saw. You see one of the Border Patrol agents, take the firearm that Alex Pretti had on his person, remove it, and in this altercation, in the scuffle, what have you, there was something that happened there, and they were yelling "gun, gun, gun." A shot goes off, and we see the ICE officer, or the Border Patrol officers, neutralize Pretti. For me, that looked like a bad shoot, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, okay, these protesters, these agitators, I don't want to call them protesters. They're agitators. Let's be honest here. Let's not kid around. They're not protesting, right? They're agitating. They're disrupting law enforcement, who have the mandate of the people, right? Who are carrying out lawful jurisdictions and enforcing our immigration and customs law, right? They're grabbing illegals and they're deporting them, as they should, under the mandate of DHS and President Trump. And I've seen a lot of reactions, on both sides about it. But for me, again, on the onset, it looked like a bad shoot. But at the same time, there's a multiple different factors at hand. Was there a miscommunication between the officer who took the firearm away from Pretti and the shot going off? Right? Was the officer who pulled his gun and engaged Pretti, did he know that the weapon was removed, or was he still under the impression that Pretti had a firearm on him, right? The totality of these circumstances has to be weighed, and it's easy to quarterback. A lot of people were quarterbacking the incident, right? But they were not putting themselves in the shoes of the officers who were there in the moment. While it is a tragedy that somebody lost their life, I don't think that it was murder. At best, and even on the very first video I saw, at best, I think it was probably manslaughter. And it was a tragic incident, a tragic accident. But again, you don't have to put yourself in that situation if you can help it. And I tell people, don't resist. We talked about this the council we had. It has to be said nowadays, but here's a pro tip for people: don't interfere with federal law enforcement and their capacity to carry out the law. Very simple, but people need to be reminded of this. in our day and age. But I'll pass it over to Angel. Those are kind of my initial thoughts on the whole incident.
Trad, I'm not too far off from where you're at. You know, it's a tragedy, and I'm not saying that to be politically correct. I'm saying that because it is. Every life is precious, right? Regardless if you're with or against, what we believe in. The reality is, you have an enormous amount of protesters. You failed to call them, not failed, but you refused to call them that because you're right. These people are blocking. I've seen the videos from Portland. I've seen the videos from Minneapolis. I've seen them. They're blocking entry and exits, egress, all that to the actual facilities where these illegal immigrants are being processed in. You know, I mean, I don't know what would drive someone to that fanaticism to block, right, a federal investigation. You got to be, out there, right, to think that you're doing the right thing and that you're just saving these people or something. But on the flip side, it was only a matter of time when all this started, when all these ICE agents were deployed to deport 2 to 11 million people that have criminal records that are here illegally in this country. It was only a matter of time before something like this happened. And we knew that, right? It was a ticking time bomb. And of course, it's going to get politicized. The legacy media is, and I'll say the standard word, fake news. And then when I saw the shooting on X, I was even questioning it because of AI. I thought a lot of this, I don't know what was true, what was not. And if what you said, Trad, is 100% accurate, that there was a weapon drawn from an officer that went off unintentionally because it was a faulty weapon, and they saw that, the person that was trying to help that woman apparently during this protest went off, and then he was concealed carrying, right? We failed to leave that out. Apparently, he had a legit concealed carry permit. Guy was a veteran and a nurse, and they used all that against the narrative. Um, it's a very difficult situation to unpack because I don't know what was accurate and what was not on X. But I can tell you that what are you doing there in the first place armed? They were in front of a business. You have a legitimate right to protest, and you should. If you don't agree with something that the government's doing, you should. But not armed and during an active investigation, an active operation. I think that's just adding fuel to the fire, and someone must have given you some incentive, or you must have driven yourself to believe that whatever you're doing is, your cause is worth more than your life. And I'll leave it there for Rick.
So interesting enough, you're talking about AI. This picture has been floating around because they're saying this was a photo of the thing, except there's no head here, in case you notice that. And this is a robot leg. But there are so many people that are taking this as fact, and the left is using this picture. Look at, they just executed Alex Pretti. This is a terrible crime, and all these other kinds of things. But that's a quick example of how AI is being used right now to push this narrative. There's
And
a lot
people
of
believe
people
it.
that are, they're just a face value, because you know why, guys? It's what they want to believe. They want to believe that ICE agents are the modern day, brown coats marching through the streets and abducting 4-year-old kids and all these other things. I agree with both of you that any loss of life is tragic. And the fact that I've been making this argument even against my own judgment, but I think it's the more logical argument that yes, our ICE and Border Patrol are being very aggressive. I think there's a reason they have to be, because they're in a place like Minnesota and Minneapolis and St. Paul, because they haven't been this aggressive in places like New Orleans and Chicago and other places. It's been pretty quiet, outside some little flare-ups here and there. But they have met such a resistance in Minneapolis and in that area that they're being driven to respond in these ways. And I think the left got exactly what they wanted. I hate to say it this way. I think the left wanted somebody to die, just like they wanted Renee Good to die. They wanted somebody to die to be a poster child. And they're getting that right now with Pretti. And we saw a lot of people respond that he, like you said, he was a nurse and all these other things, and he was just trying to help, and he was doing all this other stuff. Yet, you know, his parents, there was somebody interviewed his parents. He quit his nursing job like 2 months ago. So he actually wasn't an active nurse at this point. He had joined these guys full time in pursuing ICE agents and bothering them. This video came out today. I know Trad was sharing this.
The news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Pretti interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy. On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36 and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground.
I don't mean to say anything negative about a dead guy, but it's pretty it's pretty par for the course for all these agitators to act pretty tough and break things until, you know, the cop shows up, and then they run. They just run for their life.
Until it's time to face the consequences, right? And then they start scattering.
I'll get you off the hook here. And, you know, showing this video is not improper. I think that there's evidence here that there was something brewing in this person's life leading to the events that the tragic events that happened, that he was at some point, he made a decision to leave his job, if that's what happened.
That's allegedly, right? That's allegedly.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, and I'll make that known, but, you know, there was something that switched in this person that was somewhat more radical or leftist than the average moderate or person that may not agree. You know, there's different ways to protest. And, you know, he kicked the taillight of that car. I mean, of that SUV full of ICE agents. I mean, again, I'm not saying that every law enforcement officer is perfect. They're under an enormous amount of pressure, stress, trying to do this one job, which is, you know, get these illegal criminals out of, I'm not saying all illegals are criminals. I'm saying the ones that they're targeting, the active operations, out of this country, you know. And, you know, under the Obama administration, there were hundreds of thousands of deportations. And that's not what they talk about. They talk about one bad thing that happened.
So I just wanted to highlight this gentleman. He was armed there too. That looks a lot like a firearm in his back. I mean, this is all allegedly. We don't have that, but that looks like a firearm in his back. You know, at his 6 o'clock, was that 4 o'clock? At his 4 o'clock right there. So he was routinely showing up to these armed. Now I'm going to disagree with Angel a little bit. I think you have a right to carry wherever you want, whenever you want. I don't, you know, like when people were showing up during COVID with AR-15s and protesting there. So I don't think being armed is any should take into account. You shouldn't have a SIG P320 that goes off at the, you know, when somebody breathes on it. That's probably not a great idea. But the idea of protesting, in my opinion, is you should be able to carry there. Now, I do agree with your point, Angel, that if you're going to be doing stuff like kicking out taillights and getting up in the face of law enforcement, yeah, you're going to have a bad time, which is what I tell people in the LTC classes. It's like, listen, when you're detained by law enforcement or when you're interacting with law enforcement, you don't get to push them. You don't get to shove them. You don't get to be aggressive with them. They are going to take that as a threat, and they have the law on their side for those things. So it's a real stupid idea to think that you're going to, you know, push, shove, do all this other kind of stuff because your face is going to meet the concrete. That's what they're going to do. Their job is to secure that scene for their safety and the safety of the other officers that they work with. But go ahead.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here until all the evidence comes out.
Exactly.
You know, I believe the way he was protesting was correct. I personally don't believe that that's how the average American should protest. I think
Mm.
there's more safer ways for the greater good of the general public versus walking into an active investigation or operation with a concealed weapon. You know,
Yeah.
that's my opinion. You know, I think there's better ways to do it, and he should have protested, but not there, not the way he did it. And God rest his soul. You know, the whole thing is tragic.
It is. It is. Yeah, any thoughts, Trad?
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. I mean, looking at and just setting the stage for the audience here. The video that we just played of, Alex Pretti, the individual involved in that shooting, the man who lost his life. That was a video from about a week and a half prior to the shooting incident. So he was a known protester, or agitator, I should say. I'm not using the word protester anymore, Angel. I'll disagree with you a little bit more there. These people aren't protesting; they're agitating. They're actively impeding federal law enforcement. They're blaring sirens. They're blocking roads. They're impeding lawful arrests, and they're notifying the illegals who DHS is after, so that they can flee before the agents get to them. So, you know, again, there's lawful protests, and then there's political activism and political agitation. And I think what we're seeing from the likes of Alex Pretti and all these other leftist groups in these cities, where DHS is prevalent, is I mean, on the worst side, revolution, right? And on the best case scenario, they're actively agitating federal law enforcement, right? So that's number one. But I mean, again, the video that we saw was a snapshot into what it's like on the ground for these agents, right? They're dealing with chaos. They're dealing with a situation that is very volatile, that is active, that is very much not, a calm and serene environment. Nobody's cooperating with them. The local police are certainly not cooperating. Right, they're not getting any help from local police. They're not getting any help from any local authorities. In fact, the leaks from the Signal group chats in Minnesota have revealed that upper authorities in Minnesota, the lieutenant governor as well, all the way up to the lieutenant governor, have been revealed that they are actively coordinating and forming groups to block ICE, impede these investigations, and to basically hinder law enforcement at every opportunity. Right. So that's sort of the stage that we're in. And with that in mind, kind of my 2 cents on it, I don't think carrying a gun is a death sentence. But I will say, if you're going to impede law enforcement, destroy federal property, which is what he did. He broke a federal vehicle's taillight. He's, resisting arrest. He's assaulting federal officers. Spitting is technically considered assault in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
So you could rack up all the charges you want against this guy, right? And again, all these things can be added together to basically facilitate a very, very dangerous and very, very volatile environment. On top of that, like we've discussed, he's carrying a firearm. I don't know about you guys. I've had interactions with law enforcement. I've been pulled over. I'm carrying my Glock on me. I give them my driver's license. I give them my LTC. I let them know, hey, I do have a firearm on my person. Here's all my information. I'm good to go. I'm not a threat to you. I keep my hands where the officer could see them. I want to make him as comfortable as possible. That's me not being aggressive, not confronting ICE or DHS, and not impeding investigations. Now you throw all that on top of a scenario like that, you're just asking for trouble. Just straight up, you are asking for trouble.
Yeah, and just real quick, when I discuss in my LTC classes here in Texas what to do after an incident, if when police get there, and I always tell people I don't want the gun on me when police arrest me. I always I'm saying if I was ever involved in a self-defense incident, that I would put my gun on the ground in front of me. And the reason why is A, I don't want cops, digging around for it. B, something may happen if the gun does go off or something like that. I want them all to see it when they show up. Hey, gun's on the ground right there, right? I don't have anything else on me. And then if they search me for knives or whatever, that they're going to do that anyway. But I don't want the gun on my person when law enforcement's disarming me, because as that video shows, way too many variables in a chaotic situation, as Trad is talking about. It is very chaotic, and it is a shame. And it's a shame that things are getting politicized so quickly on both sides, where we have Alex Pretti being martyred by the left, and we have people on the right standing up for him. We have a lot of Catholics that are saying, hey, he was a good Catholic man and you should be praying for him, which the jury's still out. I don't know if he's a Catholic. Some guy put a rosary around his picture. There's got to be more. I mean, if he is, God rest his soul. He's already been to judgment. Either way, God rest his soul. But this idea that, well, he's Catholic, so obviously what the government did was wrong is a terrible take by a lot of people as well. And then it bled into this conversation, which Angel already brought up, which is a very valid conversation, where you had Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, saying you don't get to have a firearm at a protest. Now, if Angel says it, that's Angel's opinion, and we can debate that all day. I love it. But when you have the FBI director saying it, and you have the Treasury Secretary saying it, and I don't have this clip, but you have Trump being like, you can't have guns, it's bad. That is dangerous rhetoric.
No, just when
The supposedly most pro 2A administration out there, Trad. It's absolutely frightening that
Exactly.
they're going to use the protests in a way to essentially put new rules and regulations to further disarm law-abiding citizens. Because guess what? People like Alex Pretti, they're not going to listen. He didn't listen anyway. So it bothers me how quickly the right has adopted left-leaning talking points regarding firearms.
Real quick, Rick. I'm not saying that a law-abiding, properly licensed individual cannot carry a firearm into an active protest. If it's public property, you're legit, right? You
Correct.
can do it, like a sidewalk. Or what I'm saying is that the manner that Alex did it was, someone should have briefed them on saying, you should know better.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if anything goes wrong, it's going to snowball really fast. And it did. The worst case did happen. Anyways, Trad, my bad.
No, that's a good point. And I would say, I mean, a real good, easy litmus test for a situation like this. I think we're all on the same page. We're pro 2A. I don't agree with what Kash Patel said. I don't like what Trump has said. Due process later, take the guns first. He said that before, right? I think we all remember that little story there. But no, it's not unlawful for you to carry open carry, concealed carry at a protest. It's totally lawful. We've seen it in Virginia with the Second Amendment rights there being taken away here recently, but we've seen protests all over the country where law-abiding citizens stand up for their Second Amendment rights, and they're protesting in a lawful, peaceful manner. And it's totally legal for you to carry a firearm when you're doing so. That being said, if you're going to carry a firearm and you're going to agitate police, impede law enforcement, and get into physical altercations with law enforcement and then resist arrest, if that is your intention going into these situations, I don't think you should carry a gun. Okay? That's my two cents, because that's what Alex Pretti was going there for, right? A week prior, he was in that video agitating police, kicking a vehicle, spitting on ice, and resisting. And a week later, we find him again in a situation where he is impeding the arrest of two agitators by Border Patrol. He steps in between the officers and the perpetrators and tries to, get in the middle of this situation that's already chaotic. It's like, okay, he's just asking for trouble at that point. And again, I'm not saying simply carrying a gun is a death sentence. I am saying if you're going to arm yourself and then do everything that I listed, you're probably asking for trouble, though. You see, I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. I think it also we have to toss the blame towards Patel. We also have to blame. We have to be even on this, and we have to call out Kristi Noem, who has done an absolutely abhorrent job with the running of DHS. And I think it's more to the fact that Trump picked her essentially as a, for lack of a better term, I'm sorry if you're going to get offended by this, ladies and gentlemen, she's a gun bunny, and it would look good in all the press releases. Like, oh, we got a hot girl that's, we're doing the ice things, right? That he's all about recruiting and advertising and things like that. The problem is she is just not equipped to do this job. She is not really good at it. She's not good at conveying the message. Like, these are the violent criminals, and we need to have, Governor Waltz. We need the mayor. We need everybody to work with us so less people get injured. And so the odds on her getting fired, I know Trump just endorsed her, but I look at that like an NFL owner endorsing a head coach that just went 4-8. When they're like, oh yeah, we have all the trust in the world in the coach, and then like 3 weeks later he gets fired. I do see. I think Kristi Noem does get fired in the next couple of weeks. I really would like to see Kash Patel removed. I think Kash Patel has been an absolute disaster as the FBI director. And we'll talk more about him when we get to the church shooting. But I just have to go on record. I think that Kristi Noem's been an absolute disaster, and so has Kash Patel in these situations.
Yep,
Just
Pam,
because.
you can throw Pam Bondi into that situation. The Attorney General. You can throw Kristi Noem. All of these appointees by Trump have not been stellar, right? It's been a year since he's been inaugurated, right? We saw, and we're going to get to the church story here in a little bit. And this is honestly, this kind of boiled my blood more than the whole Pretti thing was the church altercation. Refusal to press charges on Don Lemon, on the people who were agitating, going into a church service. We'll get to that in a minute, but I agree. These people, if they don't resign, they should be removed from their post because it's horrible optics. I mean, it's just there's a way to do it. And again, I'm not saying you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. I was not expecting 30 million people to peacefully and without any coercion leave the country voluntarily. That's not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting there to be altercation. I was expecting there to be difficulties, and you have to have sort of a stern disposition to be like, look, this is the law. You came here illegally. Trump and DHS, they do have the people's mandate. He won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. This is what we voted for. We wanted mass deportations, and this is how you facilitate that. Now, the numbers are not really there, as we've seen in the recent reports. But that being said, regardless, that's what we want. This is what people have voted for. And I was not expecting there to be no cracked eggs when you're making this omelet, to put it lightly. But that being said, I do believe, I agree with you, Rick. Kristi Noem's she's there as optics. She's a pretty face and whatnot, but there's better people for the job, and I think that DHS needs to be ran a lot better by somebody else.
Trad, and real quick, I'm going to add something here. Sorry, Rick.
No, please go. Go.
It has nothing to do that she's a woman. It has nothing to do, of her background. It's a simple fact that, you need a bulldog in that job. It's a very difficult task.
Exactly.
To move 11 to 22 million illegal immigrants that are in this country. And when I say that, people shouldn't think of only Latin America or Mexico. These people are coming through Mexico from all over the world.
China.
Yeah, they're throwing. There's a documentary where it's shown at the border. They're breaking their IDs in half so they can have a new identity and they can be whoever they want to be. So that's how scary this is. And if they haven't been in any system, any biometrics, they're not going to know who they are. They can make up anything they want. They can be an operative from Iran or one of our enemies here in this country, and do whatever they want. This has to stop, and it's stopping. And, my parents were immigrants from a country that suffered communism. And, I'm all for it. Just do it right, And, I saw with my own very eyes, and the embassy in Haiti, there were lines of people camping out for days just trying to get papers to come into the States. They were trying to do it right. Anyways.
That you bring up a great point. And during the Biden regime, there were reporters on the border, on the Mexican side, showing IDs, passports, all the things they needed to get to Mexico via flights, just dumped all over the place. And, they also found prayer rugs. They also found all these other things. And that what you said was actually very important, Angel, because that was one of the big things people like me were talking about with the coyotes and the trafficking of women and children, because they were like, oh, you're separating families. And people like myself and maybe you guys were saying, there's no discernible way you can prove that these guys with these 3 kids, that those are his legit children. Those are kids that they kind of just grouped together and said, now you guys are a family, get across the border. They won't separate you or whatever the case may be. So there was all that kind of stuff happening back then. I'm going to be a little controversial here, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to ask you both, you said it's not because she's a woman. Do you think a woman can actually run DHS and do the job correctly?
No.
I don't mean,
stance is no.
I don't put anybody on the spot here, but let's not even say no. Let's say Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi in charge. I see a woman that does not have the fortitude to do the things that need to be done. She'd rather be on Fox News. She'd rather be doing press conferences. She's not getting in there and really, separating these things out. So I don't believe, at least in those roles, like look at Tulsi Gabbard. She's doing great as DNI. She's doing an amazing job as the director of national intelligence. She's absolutely knocking it out of the park. So it's not like all women bad. Rick hates women. Ugh. I'm saying for specific roles, in these roles where you're going to have to, roll up your sleeves and get after it. I just don't think that it goes to a women specific nature. That's all
I agree. No. I mean, I said no kind of funnily, but I honestly do mean that. No, I don't think Kristi Noem or Pam Bondi should be in these positions. Kristi Noem, because like Angel said, and I think this is very accurate for Department of Homeland Security specifically, you kind of have to be a bulldog. You have to have a very stern disposition, sort of like a Tom Homan type. The border SAR, that type of character, that mentality of, no, this is the job, and this is what we have to do to accomplish the mission. That's sort of the element you have to have. And women, to their credit, it could be a good thing or a bad thing, but they're very empathetic. They're very maternal. They see things through a different lens than men do. And men can very easily switch that part of our brains off and say, no, this is the job. This is what needs to get done. And I think Kristi Noem, for all the good she's done so far, I think she doesn't have the disposition to make the hard choices and do what needs to be done. And for Pam Bondi, I lost faith in her when she said, oh, the files are on my desk. The files are on my desk. We'll get to them. I think we all know what we're talking about here. Right. But nothing came of that. And she hasn't been pressing charges against all these agitators. Let's not forget, they arrested Trump. There's a mugshot of him, okay? Because he didn't believe the Russia narrative, right? He went to a Georgia penitentiary and got his mugshot taken. The running president and the current president of the United States. When the left has power, and I've said this before, they wield it. The right is kind of milquetoast. They're kind of If we use it, we're just going to be just like them. Okay, yeah, but we're going to win. Our cause is righteous, right? If the left wins, it's not a stretch to say that they'll come after all of us, because they've already said when we get power again, it's going to be revenge. It's going to be retributive. Okay, we have to utilize the system. We have to utilize the power now, all right, to squash and crush and utterly defeat these people so that they never have the chance to do it again. And so, no, I agree with you, Rick. I mean, it's not that they're women. I mean, that's part of it. On my end, that's part of it. But, in actuality, they don't have the disposition. They don't have the mental fortitude to do what needs to be done and make the hard choices.
So speaking of when the left comes back into power, I'm trying to find the list of what Abigail Spanberger and the rest of the Democrats that just got inaugurated into Virginia. Here you go. Just some of the things. They're going to raise taxes on everything, give illegals free schooling, strict gun control. They're going to, pretty much legalize abortion up till birth. Like you said, Trad, they're going to enact their agenda. And I think that's what a lot of people on the right are really frustrated with right now. Trump has the House, he has the Senate, he has the SCOTUS. Yes, he's had some judges interfere with some things, but you're getting a lot of people that are just like, please just do something. So, please just do something, because right now we're losing on the field of optics. We're losing on the fact that, it looks like Trump is leaving Minnesota, or he's pulling out of Minneapolis, and he's not doing the things that he needs to do. And it's just this idea of, do you know what time it is, right? If they lose the midterms, if we're looking at it from a political standpoint, if we lose the midterms, Trump's agenda is DOA. It's completely dead at that point, because he's going to spend the next 2 years being impeached. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, he didn't do anything, so he deserves it. I'm not the biggest fan of Trump in a lot of ways. but he's a heck of a lot better, than what's going on.
Yep.
Than any leftist.
I mean,
Right?
look at Virginia. The Virginia is a perfect example. They just got a new governor, and look what happened. They just passed a resolution in the Senate banning semi-automatic rifles, pistols, anything over a capacity of more than 10 rounds. It's like they've been telling us their playbook for years. We've known this. They've said, we're going to take your guns away, we're going to restrict your rights, we're going to imprison you for speech violations, etc. And when they do have power, that's exactly what they do. They enact their will. Right, and I think people are upset with Trump and these kind of MAGA Republicans and these establishment type guys because, from my perspective, right, and I maybe I can speak for both of you, but from my perspective, these guys are just sort of coasting. They're kind of just coasting, going through the motion still. It's like it's all performative, right? Oh, look, we're arresting people. Oh, look at our deportation numbers, but it's not enough to really make a dent in the illegal population. Obama was deporting more people, right? And Obama, he deported more people, and he didn't have the bad optics of, the media spinning the deportations, where it's like, oh, they're separating kids and they're abandoning kids and they're shooting protesters. It's like, okay, so we don't get mass deportations and we get the bad optics, and on top of that, Trump is saying, well, maybe it is a bad idea, so let's pull out. So it's like we just lose everywhere. It's like nothing is gained. So like mass deportations are not on the table anymore, and it's just frustrating for the voters who wanted that. Myself who wanted this. It's like, well, why did we vote for you? Like, what's the point? It's like you have a mandate that you've been given, right? You have every leverage in the government to utilize, and you're just not going to do it. It reeks of like milk toast, like just feckless sort of like ineptitude, and yeah, it's frustrating to see.
Trad, real quick, it's one of those things where it's a small group, a small percentage of these leftist extremists that are doing this. This does not account for all Democrats. There's Democrats that obviously don't align with Catholic social moral teaching, but this is only a small percentage of those left inclining Democrats that are taking the battlefield to ICE and what Trump is trying to do. You can go down the rabbit hole as deep as you want. They say that the more illegals are here and the more populations are in certain counties, where voting isn't verified, it benefits them in one way or another. More precincts that are going to be Democrat run to bring more federal dollars to those areas and wasted money. You can go down the rabbit hole as deep as you want. And you know what? It may all be true. But the reality is, I agree with you, Trad, to a certain extent. I think that if we voted for a safe border, a sovereign country, and to regain this sovereignty that we've been craving. And, we pray it doesn't happen, but if, they take, these radical agendas take over again, it may be legal for them to kick the doors down in our church during our worship service, and we can't do anything about it.
So the idea about the limited amount of people, I tend to, I agree with you in a little bit, but remember, it does not take a large percentage of the population to change things, right? We all know the 3% rule, the 3% thing about the American Revolution. When people actually look into the Bolshevik Revolution that took place in Russia, it was a surprisingly small amount of people that took over the presidential palace. It was very shocking how little effort it took to do that. So it may not be many, but look at what they were able to do in Minnesota. They were able to push the government out. They were able to, get them to a stalemate. And so that's one of those things that is difficult. And I agree with White Knight. He is a lame duck. He already is a lame duck. He may only be in, year two, but he's acting like one. And so, also White Knight says you can't vote your way out of this. And I tend to agree. I think more people are starting to see that there is no human solution here. There's my solution, which is I really think that we should be focusing more on balkanization and shoring up. Like my joke is the Gulf states of America, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida, and kind of steadfasting and keeping that as a region that we that we make essentially bulletproof, because it may not be in 2028, it may not be in 2026, but the Democrats will get back into power, and as Trad said, they are going to go scorched earth on all of us, and they're going to go on all of us. And look at what they were able to do in Minnesota at this church, which we've been talking about for it a little bit more. I'm sure all of you saw this. There was an anti-ICE Minnesota church protest. So they rushed into this church by this woman, and they got up in the faces of the churchgoers who were there on a Sunday morning, just trying to practice their God-given right to worship. And this gentleman, Tyler O'Neill from the Daily Signal, found the statements that were made by some of the people there. And the invasion of the city's church was worse than we thought. Agitators blocked the stairs, so parents were unable to get to their children at Sunday school. They were physically unable to do that. One agitator told a child, "Do you know where your parents are? Your parents are Nazis and they're going to burn in hell." You had another one that said, I don't know if you saw that woke farmer guy, folks. He was out there screaming and all these other kinds of things. He said, "This isn't God's house. It's the house of the devil." You had all kinds of stuff. And they walked in there, and one woman's arm was broken during this thing. This was a domestic terror attack on people who were doing nothing more than worshiping. And as Catholics, talking about this, the time is now. I know a lot of you Catholic guys are like, "Oh yeah, whatever. It's not, we're fine in our place." I'm pretty sure these people in Minneapolis at the city's church didn't think that they were in any real danger of having protesters storm their church on Sunday morning. You saw the panic in their eyes. They did not know what to do. Mm-hmm. And they had scoped this out enough to know that the kids were going to be in Sunday school separated from their parents at a certain time. They knew how to get in and out. Think about this, folks. If your church live streams a service, that's all the intel. They don't even need to go into your church at this point. They can just watch a Sunday service and they can get all the intel they need. They can read your bulletins, because every church posts their bulletins online and all these other kinds of things. And so if they really do mean to, and with the lack of arrest, and this is Kash Patel and Pam Bondi once again, with the lack of arrest and the lack of consequences that these protesters did not face, that is a dangerous precedent to set. And I think y'all need to absolutely really ratchet up your preparations for your church. Whoever wants to jump in after I just ranted for a couple minutes.
Rick, no, you're perfectly spot on. I mean, I posted something in the chat, a picture of a young child sitting between his mother and father, and the father is holding the child as these protesters are just going through this service. And it's a Protestant church service, right? It's we're Christian brothers and sisters. We're Catholic, they're Protestant. We believe in Jesus Christ, and we have our theological differences, but to do this during a service, during a church service, right, where people aren't bothering you, they're just there to worship God. They're there to express their religious beliefs. And these protesters, these agitators, these sick people would come in and disturb a sacrifice and a celebration to God. Like, affronts to man are one thing, and I said affronts to man are one thing, but affronts to God, those are something else, right? Those are something completely different. And they should be severely and perniciously punished, because this kind of behavior it should not be tolerated in a civil society. I look at that little kid's face and I picture my daughter, I picture my son, and then we're sitting in mass, and you have these crazy people come in who, I mean, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say, if it were within their power, demonizing us as they always do, to say, hey, they would probably kill us if they could. They would probably seek to erase us, silence our voices in the public discourse, have us utterly ostracized from society if they could. And this shows you that you can't escape these people, even if you want to be left alone. These people, I'm sure they the first thing on their mind when they went to service that day was not, oh, I wonder when the ICE protesters are going to break through the door and harass everybody. That wasn't on their mind. Their mind was to focus on worship, focus on their Sunday service. But these people took advantage of that, perhaps naivete, and they barged in, harassed people, disrupted the service, terrified people, made threats, called them Nazis, called children. Let's not forget,
Trad, real
children.
quick, what country was this in?
This was Twin Cities. I think that particular picture was in Twin Cities.
Okay, so I didn't read the story. So that's here in the U.S.?
That was in Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, that was in Minnesota. Yeah.
That's like unbelievable.
Yep. So this is just a screenshot. I mean, you could the audience can see, and we can see here. This was in Minnesota during these protests, right? And we saw another one. Maybe Rick, you can bring it up. But Don Lemon was a part of this other agitating protest where he went into another church and did something very similar. But keep in mind, they're going into these services calling children, innocent children, the little ones, as our Lord says, Nazis, haters, bigots, and it's like these people are unhinged. They're completely unhinged. They're completely devoid. They're not attached to the same world and worldview that we have. Okay, I can't fathom a scenario where any of us would do something similar to that, because we have a strong Christian moral ethic. We believe in a higher power. We believe that there are certain things you don't do because they're so outrageous and they're such an affront to God and His church. But these people don't care about that. They do not care in the slightest, and they're going to continue to do so.
Trad, there's a group of Catholics, that would not put up with this. I'm not gonna get further into that, but this would happen in our home turf, and we would put the hurting on them.
I can tell you the same thing at my parish. Joey can speak to it as well if he were here. That if you have a security team, if you have a church staff team, they're on hand, and parishioners who are willing to defend the sacred, to defend the sanctity of the Mass, and protect the innocents. Yeah, I think the outcome would be very different in our neck of the woods.
What I question is, why wasn't there anyone in that church that could have confronted these people physically and told them, you got leave or I'll physically remove you?
I'll tell you why. Let me jump in. It's because of normalcy bias. It's because they honestly didn't believe, Angel, that it could happen to them. They did not think, they thought, as they should be, that they were in a church and they were safe, not realizing that the left has no regard for the sanctity of worship, and they definitely have no sanctity for our Lord.
That's why. Spot on. Yeah.
And so the idea is, folks, when Joey and I and Angel and Trad were talking about get something together, even just guys watching the door is if they had 3 or 4 guys watching the door, so when these people started to walk up, they could have at least turned and locked the doors and made sure that they couldn't get in. That would have been at least something. Because here's another thing: they called the police. Police didn't show up. There's only 600 cops in the city, in the main city, and Mayor Fry bragged about that. Right? He bragged about defunding the police in the wake of George Floyd. So you can't count on law enforcement to be there. Now, maybe your church in your area, folks, maybe you have a police officer that's pulling security at your church or something like that. But steps need to start. You really have to take this stuff seriously, because at any moment your church could be subject to this. And this is not a major church. It's not a big church. This is not a church that would get a lot of attention. The reason they went there is because supposedly the pastor was working with ICE. So that's why they decided to do that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that was the reason they were giving. They'll use any excuse to barge through because they believe their cause to be righteous. As you both said, they have the power of belief. And because they have the power of belief, they are going to do these things. They will yell at little kids. And another thing, Angel, you said, why didn't anybody do anything? I think people on the right are scared of engaging with these protesters because the possibility of jail time is real for them. right? You know, right, conservatives, people on the right, if you push these protesters or you get in their face, the police will come and arrest you. And so that's because we have our justice system is upside down right now. So I think there is a legitimate fear on some people's parts, and I don't blame them for the recourse and the things that may happen if they actually do it. For them, it's easier for them to just sit there, let them yell at them, and blah blah blah. It'll be over soon, instead of actually engaging. That's kind of my
Yeah, and another point, and probably in the Twin Cities, there's a little more liberal than your
your
you know
southern state.
exactly.
Southern state.
I'm in the South. I'm not gonna exactly say where, but this where it happened anywhere here in a Catholic church, and you probably got like 30, 40, 50 men or young, able-bodied. They would get up and throw that person right out. They'd put the hurting in them, and they probably wouldn't do that again. And
Mm.
I mean, that wouldn't be tolerated here. I feel for those people.
It's
And
all
I'll jump in. It shouldn't be tolerated. It should not be tolerated. That's my point here. And I think you're exactly right, Rick. That it's the normalcy bias, right? Nobody thinks it can happen to them until it does, right? Until it does, and then okay, now you have to come up with strategies. You have to come up with game plans. You're going to be, in a reactionary state, preventing these situations moving forward. But this shouldn't be a thing. And it's sad to see it in our day and age where, as both sides have become more radical, it seems like the left keeps pushing the envelope further and further and further, right? I mean, what's to say next that they're not going to be, doing something more outrageous? They've already followed people to their homes under the impression that, oh, they have a Texas license plate, oh, they must be ICE, so let's follow them to their place of residence and harass them. Let's dox them. Oh, let's go out here and verbally threaten and physically threaten people simply for going about their daily lives because they happen to have, a certain hat on or paraphernalia or what have you, right? Asking for their papers in real time, which is the ironic, in a certain sense, but, asking for people's papers and documentation and making them prove they're not ICE and prove that they're not Nazis or, ICE supporters, it's outrageous. And they keep pushing this envelope further and further. Things are going to get to a fever pitch, if they haven't already. I mean, it's frightening to see, and this should be hopefully a wake up call for Christian communities of all stripes, especially Catholic, because I am Catholic. But any Christian community, if you value your religious service, if you value the sanctity of the Mass or the sacraments or of your communities, you have to have protocols in place to prohibit and stop these kinds of things from happening. That's the world we live in. Because you may think it won't happen to you. I'm sure that's what these people thought too.
And I think one thing people need to begin to, and especially men, any men that catch this live or watching live or in the replay, I always ask them, and I asked, this was brought up when I was doing News from the Pew back in Louisiana when there was the guy with the AR-15 that was stopped at the door, or he went into the church and then he was stopped. And I asked the question to those gentlemen, and I'm going to ask the question to the men in the audience right now. When you take up the decision to be part of that volunteer group to do whatever the parish needs, are you ready to go to jail? Right? I think you need to start building that in. Yeah, I have my gun. I'm ready to use it if I need to. Easy to say, but are you ready to accept the consequences that'll come with it? And I tell that, I know I say it's a broken record, but that's why I say my LTC courses as well. Are you prepared to deal with the consequences of the force? And I think a lot of people say yes when it's not there, but when the time actually comes, as Trad said, that normalcy bias is shattered. And now you're facing, okay, well, my wife's here, my child's here. Well, what happens if I get engaged? Or what if I go to jail and I lose my job and all these other kinds of things? You really need to do some soul searching on that and see if you are ready. If you're not ready, I'm not going to fault you. I'm not going to fault you at all, but you need to have that honest conversation with yourself because you're not doing anybody any favors if you say you are ready. And then when the time comes and people look to you because you said you were, and you freeze. So that's something that I encourage all men to do. And I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm not calling anybody a coward or any of these things. I think everybody that was one thing that Joey said when people apply to be part of his volunteer group. they really do question him. They really do kind of give him the third degree, because he's going to be like, well, if I'm looking to you to help and you're standing there and it's dripping down your leg, you're not much help to me. And that's okay if it's dripping down your leg, but you took a spot from somebody that is ready to go. So if you want to, if you're not ready, that's fine. And I'm sure Angel and Trav would agree. You might want to start getting your mindset ready, but have an honest conversation with yourself, because you're not doing yourself, your family, or your parish any good by, puffing your chest out to look like you are ready.
No, spot on. I agree with everything you said. I mean, you have to take a real hard look in the mirror and ask yourself, okay, do I have the training first and foremost? Do I have the wherewithal? Do I have the will? I think that's the most important thing. I mean, training can be taught, right? Equipment can be bought and trained with and earned. But do you have the will? Do you have the disposition to do what needs to be done when crap hits the fan? When a situation arises where you're put between a rock and a hard place, and you have people who are depending upon you to provide that protection, provide that aid, be a rock in the storm, and can you be that anchor? Can you be that person that someone can rely upon, to help out in a disastrous situation? So, no, I agree with everything there. Men in these communities, Catholic men, especially Christian men of good conscience, do an audit, as Joey likes to say, do an audit of yourself, of your training, of your disposition and your situation in your community, and see if you can fill that role. If you don't have a role like that in your community, think about starting one. Think about becoming the first in your community to engage and form these groups and get the training and be that bulwark, be that rock in the sea that people can rely upon. So, no, excellent points there.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up the night? Okay.
No, I'm good. I think we've said a lot. I mean, I think it's a tragedy that somebody had to lose their life over this, but I think a lot of people have had wake-up calls in light of recent events. Lines have been drawn in the sand. We've come to find out, especially on the right. I think we missed this point, but maybe in the future we could talk about on the right side of our political spectrum. A lot of people were kind of squeamish about some events that unfolded, and some people were, I don't know about this, but it's a great litmus test to discover, okay, who has the wherewithal, who has the intestinal fortitude to kind of do what needs to be done, despite bad optics, quote unquote, despite hardships. This is a civilizational battle that we're facing against people who would utterly destroy every cultural, historical, religious institution that we hold dear. And it's a zero-sum game. If they win, we lose. If we win, they have to lose. And there's no middle ground. You can't compromise with these people. You people who go into churches like this and terrorize children, how are you going to compromise with that person? How? You can't. That kind of person cannot be reasoned with, can't be bought, bullied, bargained, or negotiated with, as the Dark Knight said, as Alfred said in that movie. But anyway, no, that's kind of my message there, and I'll leave it at that.
But I do have one final thought.
Absolutely.
As we progress in these very trying times, it's all about, Catholic men and women need to realize it's about community. You need to start assembly now. Don't wait. And, prepare for any scenario at home, at church, and beyond. And, I'm not saying to take this lightly. This is the time. Don't wait for it to get worse. Assemble now. You don't have to make it this big a billboard where everyone knows what you're doing. Just have your conversations in your parish, in your circle of Catholic friends, homeschooling families, and start small, and that's all that matters. It takes 2 families to be ready. And just like in our circle here, Catholic preppers, we unite, and together we can do more than just being a solo lone wolf or whatever the case is. But we are in trying times. We need to protect our faith, our interests, our families, the minds of our children, to not get intoxicated and contaminated by this poison that the world is feeding us. And we just got to do our best.
Yep. Amen to both of you gentlemen on that. Now, I don't do it as well as Joey does, but I do have 2 deals of the week.
I knew this was coming. This was coming. My favorite part of the show.
Folks, you have no excuse. You have no excuse to have some kind of firearm. The Glock 19 clone at PSA is $259. And you know, even with taxes, you're still looking under $320 for a Glock 19 styled firearm. I have one. They run fine. PSA is high quality. They take Glock mags. I think a lot of them you could do optics cuts or not. You can find it at Mr. Guns and Gear has a newsletter, and these deals are with those all the time. So you can find it. I'm pretty sure that's at PSA. Well, it's got to be a PSA. It's a PSA firearm. But 15+1, and you know, if you don't have a lot of money for a firearm, there you go. It's a high quality firearm that you can get. The trigger's a little wonky on it, but you can get used to it. But outside of that, it's a great deal. So I would take a look at that if you haven't made the leap yet. The second one, go ahead, Trad.
No, I was gonna say great option here. I think, and correct, I'm pretty sure, but the daggers are Gen 3 clones essentially. So Gen 3 aftermarket parts, most slides, barrels, grips, etc. for Gen 3 Glocks will be compatible with the PSA daggers. So if you're looking to get this pistol, you have a huge aftermarket for accessories and things like that you can combine with this to make a pretty good EDC, pretty good home defense gun, and great way to get into shooting and firearms.
Catholic preppers approved.
Exactly.
You have $250 and you don't have a gun in your house and you're Catholic and all this mess is happening, get the gun.
You know, and you can ship it to an FFL even with shipping and tax, and they'll probably charge you to do a 4473. You're still probably coming under $350. So it's a heck of a deal. I strongly encourage you to look into that. If you are not into the Glock clone version at PSA, you can look at the Ruger Glock 19 clone. I am a huge fan of the RXM. I have it, and I am absolutely enraged that this deal exists now because I bought them a little early. But you can get the 9mm or the threaded barrel with 3 15-round magazines and a gun bag for $548. That's just like, you know, I bought it too early. So that's I don't get
buyer's remorse there, Rick.
I mean, I love the gun, but at Battlehawk Armory is a great website. I bought stuff from them. But look at that. You can get right into the same Glock ecosystem. It's optics compatible. It's a threaded barrel if you want to put a can on it. The trigger is much better than the PSAs. It has you can swap out, just like what Trad was saying, you can swap out the parts with whatever you want with the 19s. So you also get the 3 mags in a gun case. So this is an absolutely great deal at Battlehawk Armory for that. So there's deals to be had still, ladies and gentlemen.
Ruger's exceptional. Ruger is amazing. Exceptional quality, at least lately. And American made, right?
Yep. Make them either in Phoenix or in New Hampshire.
Yep. My wife's EDC is a Ruger Security 9. So she loves it. She has good training with it. So yeah, if you're out there on the fence looking for something for your home defense, for your EDC, look at these deals, look at other manufacturers and just first and foremost, just get the gun. Like Angel's saying, if you're a Catholic man, get the gun. You'll need it.
Got it.
Absolutely. Well, it was great to be with you gentlemen tonight. I thank you. We are going to end our council here. Folks, we thank you for joining us. Do us a favor. If you like what we're talking about here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps the show out, and we appreciate you doing that. We appreciate you hanging out with us. God bless, and Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey.